We are back with some Solasta II news as we have a brand new trailer, an early access date, and the devs just recently held one of their development update live streams where they showed us some really cool new stuff, mostly related to the reveal of the world map. And they also had a Q&A towards the end of that stream. But let's go ahead and get right into the big news though, and that is that Solasta II will be entering into its early access in early 2026 on Steam, but early access should include Steam Deck compatibility, and they will do their best for early optimization for it. But of course, keep in mind that early access is never fully optimized. On official release, they are aiming to include consoles, and also at some point during early access, they are planning to add 4-player co-op multiplayer to test that out a bit before launch. In the dev update stream, they did state that they are technically shooting for Q1 of 2026, but they're going to stick with early 2026 terminology. Early access will launch with 6 playable classes: Fighter, Rogue, Wizard, Cleric, Paladin, and Sorcerer. And as early access goes on, they do plan on adding more of the classes, kind of similar to how BG3 did their early access. The goal in total is to have 12 classes with 2 subclasses each by 1.0. And I'll get more into subclasses later in the Q&A section. And for races, on early access launch, expect humans, dwarves, elves, and halflings, and they're hoping for more by 1.0, but no promises. As far as how big early access will be, really depends on player playstyle, but they did state that if you choose to focus mainly on the main story, that you could get 8 to 10 hours or so out of it for the minimum. But in a game like this, most of us will of course engage with side content, etc. So I'm personally expecting, I'm going to guess like 15 to 20 or so hours on that first early access run. But do keep in mind that the main game is planned to be a 40+ hour campaign. Now the footage playing in the background here is the new Welcome to Neokos trailer, and Neokos is the continent in which this game will take place on. Different from the first game, but still the same world. And you're currently looking at the city of Kair Mar, which seems to have a bit of a Mediterranean inspiration behind it. These 4 characters right here represent your customizable party of 4 that will be with you for the entire game. There are no core companions, so to say, like, BG3 or Pathfinder type companions, but I'm going to touch back on that topic here in a moment. So the story behind the 4 customizable characters is basically that these 4 characters are all family, adopted sisters and brothers, but how this adopted family story will work, the devs stated that we'll have to wait until next month to find out, but they did say that there is quite a lot behind this party and what it means, and also to expect more party bantering this time around. But back to companions, there will be some NPCs that can join your party of 4, ultimately increasing your party size to, I believe they said at most 6 at a time, but you won't be controlling these companions' inventories, what they level into, etc. They're more so NPCs that can join along and many times will die to never be seen again, although it was stated that their survivability is higher than the first game's companions, and also that these companions will be leveling up on their own, so they will be able to maintain some sort of power level that at least comes close to the content that you're experiencing. And yes, you will control them when you're moving and in combat, but you don't really control anything outside of that. Some of you might have noticed Kepler Interactive being named in the trailer, and that is because Kepler will be publishing this game, so they are helping finance and market Solasta II, but Tactical Adventures still, of course, holds the creative control here. Just so you're aware, as anytime you say publisher, people get scared, and maybe very well it ends up being a bad thing, but Kepler also helped Sandfall with Clair Obscur, so I think this could be a really great partnership, and Tactical Adventures also seems to be really happy about it, so I'm excited to see what they can do with a larger budget and a louder marketing microphone, if you will, but only time will tell. Good news is that clearly from the demo, the trailers, and these development updates, this second game is appearing to be a pretty big step up from the first game, with noticeable improvements to visuals, voice acting, new features such as the ability to go down into the third-person perspective, something that BG3 did offer as well. And I'm actually super hyped for this, as I think it's an amazing feature for immersion when exploring. And not to mention, it can bring in a lot more eyes to a game when players see that it's not just a top-down view type game. There's also just a ton of improvements across the board. You'll see the world map here momentarily and see how it works. It's a major upgrade from Solasta 1. Now, since I did mention the demo, do note that it can still be downloaded for free on Steam if you want to try it out. It is a standalone demo, and although the location may be used in the full game, the story will not be, so you'll not really be spoiling yourself at all. Do keep in mind, though, that the demo contains the old rules set, as Tactical Adventures did announce a few months back that Solasta II is updating, or switching, if you will, to the 2024 rules set for D&D 5th edition, rather than the 2014 rules set, which was used in the first game and also is used in the demo. But let's get right into the world map reveal, and then we'll do the Q&A. And this is the first time we are getting to see some actual gameplay of the world map, which is currently centered over the city of Karamar. I think I'm pronouncing that right. You can already tell how much more detailed the map is compared to Solasta 1, and this is of course still very much in development. So the purpose of the world map, its function, so to say, is of course to simulate traveling to different regions and locations. So obviously you're going to be going into these locations and running around and exploring, but when traveling from location to location, you'll use the world map. And the devs stated that their goal here is to recreate the tabletop RPG travel experience the best that they possibly can. Now, the continent of Neokos is divided into regions and biomes such as coastal, desert, mountains, forests, grasslands, and swamps. And we, the players, will be starting at the top of the continent here in the city of Karamar, and then we'll be working our way down the peninsula into the larger expanse of land. As you move into different hexagons or cells, this will cost some of your party's movement, and you can see the movement bar represented down in the bottom middle of the screen. Once you run out of movement, your party will be forced to take a rest, which is of course a core mechanic to 5th edition. And if you want that satisfying long rest that replenishes all of your party's HP, spells, etc., your party will need to have one ration available to spend. Now, you may be noticing that the movement bar is divided into 8 sections here, with 4 of them being in the regular move category, which represents traveling in the daytime, and the forced march category, which is traveling at night. So the way that this works is that when you move into a different cell, that specific cell will require a certain amount of movement points to get through. For example, this one right here only requires 1 as it's on a road. But if you're moving through tougher terrain off-road, such as through a forest or swamp, you may find that you actually need 2 or more points to make a move into or through that cell. Spending your first 4 points, your regular movement points, carry no risk at all of party members becoming exhausted. But if you decide to move further and push into that second half of the movement bar, the time of day will be changed to nighttime, which carries its own risks, and you'll be moving in forced march mode. The catch here is that every time you move in forced march, each of your party members must do a Constitution ability check, and if they fail, they'll gain a level of exhaustion. So in Solasta II, each level of exhaustion that a party member acquires equates to a -2 to all of their D20 rolls, as well as a -5 penalty to their movement speed. So if you were to let several of your party members become really exhausted, and then you end up in a random encounter, or perhaps you don't have a ration to do a long rest before arriving in a new potentially hostile location, you could be putting yourself in a rather tough situation. So pushing into forced march will get you to places faster and allow you to conserve more rations, but it carries risk with it as well. Now, when you're traveling, there are several what the game calls world events that can trigger as you move through different cells. And the type of events that trigger depend on the biome that you're in, whether you're traveling in the daytime with regular march or at nighttime in forced march. And some events can even trigger as somewhat of a reaction to things that you did previously in your run, such as having spoke with a certain NPC. There is an RNG system behind what events will trigger, but it's all within the parameters of your party's current situation and location. When you do encounter an event, the game will take you to a scene that represents the biome that you're currently in. Right here we have what is called a travel encounter, and as you can tell, the floating characters here clearly show that this is very much a work in progress. We have a lot of placeholder stuff going on here. But this travel encounter takes place in a coastal scene, as the party was traveling in the coastal biome, and the party has the opportunity to now observe the carcass of a large creature to see what potentially may be revealed. Skill checks will come into play, or they can choose to just leave if they feel like something isn't right and they don't want to chance a combat encounter. This event right here is a night encounter with a fellow wanderer. The player chooses and succeeds in a charisma check with this wanderer, which then reveals some more dialogue and conversation. Now, devs did state that you will be able to use spells, cantrips, and abilities like the fighter's new tactical mind ability in situations like these to help you succeed in skill checks, and guidance, of course, will be in the game, a very popular cantrip in BG3 and, of course, D&D 5th edition. Now, there's a ton of different types of events in this game, including random combat encounters, something you experienced in Solasta 1. And some of these events will give XP, of course, among many other things like information, loot. The list goes on. According to the devs, the overall map is quite large. In early access, we of course won't have access to all of it, which I think is a very good thing. And as we navigate freely, we will encounter impassable mountain peaks, etc., that will sometimes force a player to find an alternate route. Also notice that each cell that you scroll over will tell you if there are any active quests in that cell, and you can also see location features, such as if a location has merchants. This is a huge upgrade from the first game's world map travel system, and I, for one, am super excited to see how this all comes together, and I'm happy that they're expanding on it, as it's one of the features of Solasta that makes it quite unique from other games, especially a game like BG3. All right, for the rest of the video, I'm going to just go over some of the Q&A here and perhaps offer some more context if I can. And in the background, I will have footage from me playing the demo, I don't know, 4 months ago or whenever I played it. Just keep in mind that the demo is not a one-to-one representation of what the game will actually be. So someone in the chat did ask if the game is inspired by BG3, and the devs basically said it is in some ways, as pretty much all of them love Baldur's Gate 3, but they also made it very clear that they're focused on their own mission and goals here, many of which do differ from Baldur's Gate 3. And as someone who played the first game, I can vouch for them in this regard. Solasta 1 absolutely had its own identity. It's much more true to tabletop D&D, a bit more hardcore, shall I say, with many of its mechanics. And perhaps most importantly, Solasta is its own universe and world that has nothing to do with the Forgotten Realms. It's also very important to note that BG3 was made by Larian Studios, a very experienced studio that finished Baldur's Gate 3 with a team of over 400. While Tactical Adventures, the team behind Solasta II, has fewer than 40 people working on this game, and this is only their second game as a studio. So the devs want you all to know up front to not expect Baldur's Gate 3's scope, cinematics, or sheer volume of content. We're talking two very different development processes, budgets, etc. here. Very, very different. Let's talk about subclasses. So Solasta 2 will mostly be comprised of homebrew subclasses, and their plan as of right now is to have one homebrew subclass from Solasta 1, as well as a completely new subclass that is unique to the continent of Neokos. I will say, though, that Life Cleric from the SRD 5.2 has been confirmed. The devs also answered a question related to the Ready Action, a feature that did exist in Solasta 1, but was rather limited. Ready Action will be making a return to Solasta 2, but this time around you'll be able to do a lot more with it, such as readying a magic missile, or there might be some sort of lunge attack, etc. AoE spells like Fireball, however, will not be able to be readied for balancing reasons mainly. And on a side note, grappling will not be in the game, as the devs did state that it's a bit too complicated and basically not worth the time and resources to implement it, as they wouldn't be able to do it in a way that they feel is good enough, and it would take away from other aspects of the game that they should be focusing on. Someone asked if character creation has improved from the first game, and the response was yes, drastically. Way more options and better visuals to go along with it, but we'll get more information and see more on that as time goes on. There was a question about whether or not you could play a truly evil character or evil aligned party, and basically the answer is no, as all players will have the same goal of stopping the villain Shadowin, but players will have some agency to align with different factions and NPCs, and some of them may be a bit more on the morally gray side of the spectrum. Now, I do want to personally comment on this. I do really wish that you could do an evil run in this game, like a truly evil run, but realistically, it is just a ton of work for a studio to do this in a quality manner, and Tactical Adventures is a pretty small team here, only on their second game. So my hopes here are if Solasta II is successful enough that perhaps in their next game they can actually start trying to dip more into major story permutations. But it's understandable why they can't really do that now, but I think they're still going to get that as a fairly common criticism because this is a D&D game, and, you know, doing evil or good and having the freedom to do that is kind of a core thing to D&D. As far as voiceover languages go, everything in this game is voiced, which means that they really have to focus in on English and making sure that they get that right. However, there will be plenty of text, subtitle, language, localization choices, and they said they're going to include as many as they possibly can. So thank you all so much for watching. I am very interested in Solasta II. The first one was a fantastic experience, and I think this one's going to be even better. So I will continue to keep you all updated if there's any important updates, and of course I will be playing and covering a bit the early access launch as well as 1.0. So I'll catch you all on the next one.